The late evening rain drummed against the windows of Naomi Thompson's penthouse apartment as she stood frozen in her hallway, shopping bags scattered at her feet. Through the crack in her bedroom door, she heard the voice that had whispered sweet promises just hours before, now speaking words that felt like daggers to her heart. "She's not smart, Mom. I will marry her, take everything, and give you a better life." Derek's voice carried clearly through the phone speaker he'd left on. The woman built $1 million tech company, but she's so desperate for love she can't see what's right in front of her face. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the gasp that threatened to escape. Her legs trembled as Derek's cruel laughter filled the space between them. "Trust me, Helen. 6 months after the wedding, I'll have access to everything. Her business, her properties, her trust fund. The prenup she keeps talking about? I got that handled. My lawyer friend says there are ways around those things when you know what you're doing." The sound of Derek's footsteps moving toward the bathroom gave Naomi precious seconds to slip back toward the front door, her heart hammering so hard she was sure it would give her away. 24 years old when she'd started her software company from nothing, she'd built an empire through late nights, countless rejections, and unwavering determination. At 32, she employed over 200 people and had earned respect in an industry that didn't always welcome black women with open arms. But none of that success had prepared her for this moment. "The best part is she actually thinks I love her," Derek continued, his voice growing louder as he returned to the bedroom. "She's so grateful that someone wants to marry her at 32. Acts like she won the lottery when I proposed. It's almost too easy." The shopping bags in Naomi's hands contained the wedding favors she'd spent the afternoon selecting, small plants in decorative pots with tags reading "Love Grows Here." She'd been so excited to show Derek, so proud of the thoughtful touch that would make their guests smile. Now the irony felt suffocating. What about her family? Helen's voice crackled through the speaker. Won't they be suspicious? Her mother Beverly is sweet but trusting. The sister Grace is too busy with her nursing career to pay attention. And her best friend Simone? She's too caught up in her own law practice to notice anything. Besides, they all think Naomi finally found her Prince Charming. They're just happy she's not alone anymore. Naomi closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 years wasted on a man who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck. 3 years of believing Derek understood her, supported her dreams, loved her for who she was beneath the success and achievements. 3 years of introducing him to her mother's Sunday dinners, her sister's birthday parties, her business meetings where she proudly called him her future husband. "The wedding is in 8 weeks, Derek said. "By Christmas, we'll be living in that big house in Buckhead, and you can quit that job at the grocery store. Naomi's already talking about adding my name to her business accounts for partnership and trust." Can you believe it? The plant Naomi had been holding slipped from her numb fingers, the pot shattering against the marble floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the entire apartment. Derek's voice stopped immediately. "What was that?" Helen asked. "Nothing, Mom. Probably just the neighbor upstairs. Look, I have to go. Naomi should be back from shopping soon, and I need to practice looking like the loving fiancé." Naomi heard the phone call end and Derek's footsteps approaching the bedroom door. Her mind raced through possibilities: confront him now, pretend nothing happened, run. Instead, she found herself standing perfectly still, surrounded by scattered dirt and broken pottery, as the man she'd planned to spend her life with opened the door and stepped into the hallway. "Baby? What happened here?" Derek's voice carried the same warmth that had fooled her for 3 years, but now it sounded hollow and practiced. "Did you drop something?" She looked up at him. This man she'd kissed goodbye just that morning, this man whose ring sat on her finger, whose name was already printed on wedding invitations. His brown eyes showed concern, his brow furrowed with what looked like genuine worry. If she hadn't heard his conversation, she would have melted into his arms and laughed about her clumsiness. Naomi's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I heard you talking." Derek's expression shifted so quickly she almost missed it. A flash of panic before the mask of confusion slid into place. "Talking? I was just on a conference call with a client. You know how loud I get when I'm discussing properties." The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that Naomi realized this wasn't the first time Derek had deceived her. How many other conversations had there been? How many other plans made behind her back? "Derek," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I heard everything. Every word about taking my money, about not loving me, about your mother and the grocery store job." The pretense dropped from Derek's face like a curtain falling. For the first time since she'd known him, Naomi saw who Derek Patterson really was: cold, calculating, and completely without remorse. "So what if you did?" he said, his voice losing all warmth. What are you going to do about it? Call off the wedding? Embarrass yourself in front of everyone? Your mother already ordered her dress, your sister planned the bridal shower, your best friend booked the venue. You think they'll all understand when you tell them you called it off because you overheard a private conversation? A private conversation about stealing from me. Derek stepped closer and Naomi instinctively backed against the wall. Stealing? I prefer to think of it as collecting what I've earned. Do you know how many boring business dinners I've sat through? How many times I've had to smile and nod while you talked about your company like it's changing the world? How many nights I've had to pretend to care about your day? Get out. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere that remembered the little girl who'd stood up to bullies on the playground, the teenager who'd refused to let anyone tell her she couldn't pursue computer science, the young woman who'd pitched her business idea to 40 investors before finding one who believed in her. Get out of my apartment. Now. Derek laughed, a sound that made Naomi's skin crawl. This is our apartment, remember? My name is on the lease. My clothes are in the closet. My life is here too. Your name is on the lease because I added it. Your clothes are here because I invited you to move in. Your life is here because I made space for you in mine. But this is my apartment, my home, and I'm telling you to leave. Fine, Derek said, his voice turning ugly. But don't think this is over. You can't just kick me out and pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. I know things about your business, your finances, your family. I know passwords and security codes and where you keep important documents. You really want to make an enemy out of me? The threat hung between them like poison in the air. Naomi felt a fear she hadn't experienced since she was a child, but underneath it, something else began to grow, a fierce determination that Derek had underestimated. You're right, she said quietly. The last 3 years did happen. I trusted you, loved you, shared everything with you. I brought you into my family, my business, my heart. I made the mistake of thinking you were a good man. She bent down and picked up one of the unbroken plant favors, reading the tag that now felt like a cruel joke. But I built my company from nothing, Derek. I've dealt with competitors who tried to steal my ideas, investors who tried to cheat me, and clients who thought they could take advantage of me. I survived all of that, and I'll survive you too. Derek's face twisted with anger and something that looked like genuine surprise. You think you're so smart, so strong. But you're just a lonely woman who was grateful someone wanted her. That's what I saw from the first day we met, desperation dressed up as success. The words were meant to destroy her, and for a moment they did. Naomi felt the familiar ache of every insecurity she'd carried, every doubt that had whispered she might die alone, every fear that her success couldn't fill the emptiness in her personal life. But then she looked at Derek, really looked at him, and saw what she should have seen 3 years ago. This wasn't a man who'd fallen in love with her. This was a predator who'd sensed vulnerability and moved in for the kill. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened to fall. I wasn't desperate. I was hopeful. I believed in love and trust and building something real with another person. That wasn't weakness, Derek. That was courage. And the fact that you can't see the difference between those things is exactly why you'll never have what I have. What you have. Derek scoffed. An empty apartment and a business full of employees who don't really know you? Friends who only call when they need something? A family who worries you'll never find anyone? What I have, Naomi said, walking to the front door and opening it wide, is integrity. Self-respect. People who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. A life I built with my own hands and a future that belongs to me. Derek stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him recalculating, trying to find another angle of attack. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost pleading. Naomi, come on. You're upset, I understand that. But think about this logically. We're good together. We make sense. So what if I said some things I shouldn't have? Every couple fights, every couple has problems. We can work through this. No, Naomi said simply. We can't. Because there is no we, Derek. There never was. There was just you using me and me too blind to see it. Derek's expression hardened again. Fine. But don't think you can just erase me from your life. I'll fight you on every contract, every lease agreement, every joint account. I'll make your life hell. You can try, Naomi said. But I didn't get where I am by backing down from fights. And unlike you, I don't fight dirty. As Derek stormed past her toward the bedroom, presumably to pack his things, Naomi closed the front door and leaned against it. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, too full of memories that were now tainted with lies. She looked down at her left hand, where the engagement ring Derek had given her caught the light from the hallway fixture. It was beautiful, a classic solitaire that had made her cry when he'd proposed in her mother's garden last spring. Now she wondered if he'd calculated the cost against what he expected to gain from their marriage. With trembling fingers, she slipped the ring off and set it on the hallway table next to her keys. It felt like removing a chain she'd worn without realizing how heavy it was. Through the apartment walls, she could hear Derek moving around, opening drawers and closets. Part of her wanted to supervise, to make sure he didn't take anything that belonged to her. But a larger part of her just wanted him gone, wanted to begin the process of reclaiming her space in her life. She pulled her phone from her purse and stared at the screen. Who could she call? Who could she tell? Her mother would be heartbroken. Beverly had grown to love Derek like the son she'd never had. Her sister Grace would be furious and protective, probably wanting to drive over immediately. Her best friend Simone would drop everything to come sit with her, would probably offer to sue Derek for emotional distress. But right now, Naomi didn't want comfort or protection or legal advice. She wanted to sit in the silence and process what had just happened. She wanted to understand how she'd been so wrong about someone she'd thought she knew completely. 20 minutes later, Derek emerged from the bedroom with 2 suitcases and a bag slung over his shoulder. He paused at the front door, and for a moment Naomi thought he might apologize, might show some sign of regret for the pain he'd caused. Instead he said, "This isn't over, Naomi. You'll regret this." After he left, Naomi stood in her hallway surrounded by the remnants of the broken plant and the scattered wedding favors. The silence felt different now, not empty but expectant. Like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air is charged with possibility. She picked up one of the plant tags and read it again. Love grows here. Maybe it could. Maybe she could learn to love herself enough to see clearly, to trust wisely, to build relationships based on truth instead of hope. Maybe she could grow something real from the broken pieces Derek had left behind. But first she had a wedding to cancel, a family to tell and a life to rebuild. The rain continued to fall outside her windows as Naomi Thompson began the hardest chapter of her life, and the one that would ultimately save her. The next morning came too early and not soon enough. Naomi had spent the night alternating between staring at the ceiling and pacing her apartment, her mind racing through 3 years of memories that now felt like evidence in a case she'd been too trusting to investigate. Every sweet gesture, every supportive word, every moment she'd thought proved Derek's love, all of it was suspect now. She sat at her kitchen island with her laptop open and a legal pad beside it, trying to create an inventory of what Derek had access to. The list grew longer and more terrifying with each item. Joint checking account, she'd added his name 6 months ago. Business credit cards, he'd convinced her he needed them for networking events. Home security codes. Her mother's address and schedule. Grace's work information. Simone's law firm details. Copies of her tax returns. Knowledge of her investment portfolio. Access to her home office when she traveled. The methodical way Derek had positioned himself throughout her life made Naomi's stomach turn. This hadn't been a crime of opportunity, it had been a carefully planned infiltration. Her phone rang, startling her from her dark thoughts. Simone's name appeared on the screen, and Naomi realized she must have been ignoring calls and texts all morning. "Girl, you better be dead or dying because I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. Simone's voice was equal parts worry and irritation. "I need to know if you want the bridesmaids' dresses in navy or midnight blue, and Grace is having a meltdown about the bridal shower menu." Naomi opened her mouth to speak but no words came. "How do you tell your best friend that the wedding she's been helping plan is off because the groom is a con artist?" "Naomi? You there?" "Simone," she managed, her voice hoarse from crying. "I need you to come over. Now." The shift in Simone's tone was immediate. "What happened? Is it your mom?" "Grace. It's Derek. It's bad, Simone. Really bad. I'm on my way. Don't move, don't make any decisions, just wait for me." 30 minutes later, Simone Davis burst through Naomi's front door like a force of nature. At 34, she was a successful defense attorney with a reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning them through sheer determination and brilliant legal strategy. She was also the friend who'd held Naomi's hair back in college when she was sick, who'd celebrated every business milestone, who'd been the maid of honor at what was supposed to be Naomi's wedding in 8 weeks. "Start talking," Simone said, dropping her purse and crossing her arms. "And don't you dare sugarcoat anything." Naomi told her everything. Derek's phone conversation, the threats, the sudden clarity about how carefully he'd positioned himself in her life. Simone listened without interrupting, but Naomi could see the storm building in her friend's dark eyes. "That son of a..." Simone caught herself and took a deep breath. "Okay. First things first. We need to protect your assets immediately. Have you changed any passwords? I stayed up all night doing that. Bank accounts, credit cards, business systems, everything. Good. What about the joint accounts? I transferred everything to accounts he can't access and closed the joint ones this morning. The bank flagged it as unusual activity, but I explained the situation to the manager. Simone nodded approvingly. Smart. What about your business? Does he have access to anything there? Some things. I gave him a company credit card for when he came to events with me. He knows some of my employees, has been to the office plenty of times. Naomi's hands shook as she reached for her coffee. Simone, what if he tries to sabotage something? I have clients, employees who depend on me. We're going to handle this legally and properly, Simone said firmly. No more panic, no more fear. We're going to document everything, build a case, and make sure Derek Patterson learns what happens when he messes with the wrong woman. Before Naomi could respond, her phone rang. Her mother's name appeared on the screen, and Naomi felt her stomach drop. She'd been dreading this conversation all morning. Hi, Mama. Good morning, sweetheart. I was just calling to confirm the final head count for the rehearsal dinner. Your cousin Denise is bringing her new boyfriend, so we need to add one more plate. The mundane wedding detail felt surreal given everything that had happened. Naomi looked at Simone, who nodded encouragingly. Mama, I need to talk to you about something. Can you come over? Of course, baby. Is everything all right? You sound tired. I'm fine, it's about the wedding. I need to talk to you and Grace together. There was a pause on Beverly's end. Naomi, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Just come over, please. And bring Grace. We'll be there in 20 minutes. After hanging up, Naomi slumped against the kitchen counter. I don't know how to tell them, Simone. My mother loves Derek. She keeps talking about how proud she is that I found such a good man, how happy my father would be if he were still alive. Simone moved to stand beside her friend, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. You tell them the truth. Your family loves you, not Derek. They'll be heartbroken for you, not about losing him. But the wedding? Everyone's already made plans, spent money, taken time off work. The venue, the catering, the flowers. All of that can be handled. The only thing that can't be undone is marrying someone who doesn't love you and plans to steal from you. When Beverly and Grace arrived, Naomi saw immediately that her mother had been worrying during the drive over. At 58, Beverly Thompson was still beautiful. With silver-streaked hair she kept in elegant twists and the kind of warm smile that made strangers feel like family. She'd raised 2 daughters alone after her husband's death when Naomi was 15, working as a high school English teacher while going to night school to earn her master's degree. She was the strongest woman Naomi knew, which somehow made what she had to tell her even harder. Grace, at 29, looked more like their father, tall and lean with expressive eyes that missed nothing. She'd inherited Beverly's nurturing spirit but expressed it through her work as a pediatric nurse, caring for sick children with the same fierce love she'd always shown her older sister. All right, Beverly said, settling onto Naomi's couch with Grace beside her. What's going on? And don't you dare tell me it's nothing. I raised you, remember? Naomi looked at Simone, who gave her another encouraging nod, then took a deep breath and told her family everything. She watched her mother's face go through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally heartbreak. Grace spoke first. I'm going to kill him. Grace, Beverly said automatically, but her voice lacked its usual authority. I'm serious, Mama. I knew something was off about him. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt wrong. Why didn't you say anything? Naomi asked. Because you seemed happy and I thought maybe I was just being overprotective. Grace's voice was thick with guilt. I should have trusted my instincts. Beverly had been quiet throughout Grace's outburst, and when she finally spoke, her voice was steady but strained. How long do you think this has been his plan? Probably from the beginning, Simone answered when Naomi hesitated. These kinds of scams require long-term planning and commitment. Derek didn't just decide to do this last week. 3 years, Beverly said quietly. 3 years of Sunday dinners, holidays, family events. 3 years of me treating him like the son I never had. Mama, I'm so sorry, Naomi began, but Beverly cut her off. Don't you apologize for this. This is not your fault. You loved someone who didn't deserve it, and that's not a character flaw, it's proof that you have a good heart. But I should have seen it. I should have been smarter. Intelligence and intuition are different things, Beverly said firmly. And predators like Derek are experts at hiding their true nature. You can't blame yourself for not seeing something he worked so hard to conceal. Grace had been unusually quiet, and when Naomi looked at her, she saw tears streaming down her sister's face. "Grace? What is it?" "I'm just so angry," Grace said, her voice breaking. "Angry that someone hurt you like this. Angry that he fooled all of us. Angry that he made you doubt yourself." She looked up at Naomi with fierce eyes. "But mostly I'm angry that he has no idea what he's lost. He had the chance to love an amazing woman for real and he threw it away for money." The words broke something loose in Naomi's chest, and for the first time since hearing Derek's phone call, she truly cried. Not the angry tears of betrayal or the fearful tears of uncertainty, but the deep, grieving tears of loss. Not for Derek, but for the life she'd thought she was building, for the trust that had been shattered, for the innocence she'd never get back. Simone moved to the couch and gathered both Thompson sisters into her arms while Beverly rubbed Naomi's back with the same gentle touch she'd used when Naomi was small and had nightmares. "We're going to get through this," Beverly said quietly. "All of us together. And when we're done, you're going to be stronger than you ever imagined." Over the next hour they made a plan. Simone would handle the legal aspects, including filing a police report for Derek's threats and beginning documentation of his fraud attempts. Beverly would contact the wedding vendors and family members to cancel or postpone everything. Grace would stay with Naomi for a few days to make sure she wasn't alone and to help her change locks and security codes. "What about Derek's things?" Grace asked. "He left a lot of stuff here." "I'll handle that," Simone said grimly. "I'll have it professionally packed and delivered to wherever he's staying, with a formal notice that he's not to contact Naomi or set foot on this property." "And the ring?" Beverly asked gently. Naomi looked at the engagement ring still sitting on her hallway table. "I don't want it. Maybe we can sell it and donate the money to something good. Turn something ugly into something helpful." "That's my girl," Beverly said proudly. As her family and best friend worked to dismantle the wedding plans and protect her from Derek's potential retaliation, Naomi felt something she hadn't expected: relief. The fear and anger were still there, but underneath them was a growing sense of freedom. She wasn't marrying Derek Patterson. She wasn't tying her life to someone who saw her as a mark instead of a partner. She was free. It would take time to heal, time to trust again, time to rebuild. But for the first time in months, Naomi felt like herself. Not the grateful woman Derek had seen, not the desperate spinster he'd described, but the strong, intelligent, capable woman who'd built a successful business and earned the love of people who valued her for who she truly was. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the apartment was quiet again, Naomi sat in her home office and pulled up the files for her latest project. A software platform that would help small businesses protect themselves from financial fraud. She'd been working on it for months, never realizing how personally relevant it would become. As she coded late into the night, she thought about Derek's words, "She's not smart, Mom." Maybe she hadn't been smart about love. Maybe she'd been too trusting, too hopeful, too willing to believe the best in someone who didn't deserve it. But she was smart about everything else. And starting tomorrow she was going to be smarter about love too. Word spreads fast in close-knit communities, and by Wednesday morning Naomi's phone was buzzing with calls and texts from family members, friends, and even business acquaintances who'd heard about the called-off wedding. She'd expected pity, awkward questions, and maybe some judgment about her poor decision-making. Instead she was overwhelmed by support. Her Aunt Patricia drove down from Atlanta with a car full of comfort food and fierce indignation. "That boy fooled all of us, baby. But the Lord reveals truth in His own time. You're blessed to find out before you were legally bound to Him." Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins from next door knocked on her door with homemade sweet potato pie and stories about her own near-miss with a smooth-talking man in 1967. "Some men see successful women as challenges to conquer, honey. You just got yourself free before he could do any real damage." Even her business partner, Michael Chin, called from Seattle where he was handling their West Coast operations. "I never liked him," he admitted. "Something about the way he looked at our financial reports during company events. Too interested, if you know what I mean." But it was her mother's response that surprised Naomi most. Rather than retreating into embarrassment or grief over the canceled wedding plans, Beverly Thompson went into full protective mode, not just for Naomi but for the entire family. "I've been thinking about this all night," Beverly said, appearing at Naomi's apartment Thursday morning with Grace in tow and a determined expression. "Derek knows too much. About our family, where I live, Grace's work schedule, our routines. We need to take precautions." "What kind of precautions?" Naomi asked, though she was relieved someone else was thinking about the broader implications of Derek's threats. "I'm changing my locks today. Grace is talking to her supervisor about varying her shifts for a while. And I think you should consider hiring a security consultant to evaluate your office and this building. Grace nodded in agreement. I did some research last night about financial predators. They often have accomplices and they don't usually target just one person. Derek might have been planning to use your success to fund other schemes. The systematic way her family was approaching the situation made Naomi realize something important. Derek had underestimated all of them. He'd seen Beverly as a sweet, trusting older woman and Grace as a busy professional who wouldn't pay attention to details. He'd completely missed their intelligence, their strength, and their fierce loyalty to each other. There's something else, Beverly continued. I called Pastor Williams yesterday to let him know the wedding was canceled. He asked if he could stop by to talk to you. Pastor Robert Williams had been their family minister since Naomi was a teenager. He'd officiated at countless family weddings and funerals, including her father's service. More than a religious figure, he was a family friend and community elder whose wisdom Naomi had always valued. I'm not really in the mood for a God has a plan conversation right now, Mama. That's not why he wants to come, Beverly said gently. He's concerned about Derek. Apparently, Derek approached him last month about some kind of investment opportunity involving the church building fund. Naomi felt ice in her veins. What kind of investment opportunity? Pastor Williams didn't give him any details, but he said Derek was very persistent. Made it sound like he had inside knowledge about some real estate development that would guarantee returns for the church. Oh my God, Grace breathed. He was going to scam the church too? The scope of Derek's plans was becoming clearer, and it made Naomi sick. This hadn't just been about her money, it had been about using her credibility and connections to access other people's resources. Her family, her church, her business network, all of it had been targets in Derek's larger scheme. When Pastor Williams arrived that afternoon, his usually jovial demeanor was replaced by serious concern. A man in his 50s with graying temples and kind eyes that seemed to see everything, he guided their family through some of their darkest moments. I'm not here to preach, he said, settling into Naomi's living room. I'm here because I'm worried Derek Patterson has been running game on more people than just you. He explained that Derek had approached him 3 separate times about the supposed investment opportunity, each time becoming more insistent when Pastor Williams politely declined. The last time he got angry. Said I was being short-sighted, that I was holding the church back from growth. That's when I knew something wasn't right. Did he mention me during these conversations? Naomi asked. Constantly. He positioned everything as though you were the one vouching for his credibility. Said you'd discussed investing church funds with him, that you thought it was a great opportunity for the community. Naomi felt nauseated. I never said any of that. I didn't even know he was talking to you about investments. I figured as much. That's why I called your mother yesterday. I was worried Derek might be using your name in other situations without your knowledge. The implications hit Naomi like a physical blow. If Derek had been using her reputation to approach the church about investments, where else had he been trading on her credibility? Her business relationships, her professional network, her community connections. All of it could be compromised. Pastor Williams, she said slowly, do you know of anyone else Derek might have approached? Not specifically, but I can make some calls. There's an informal network of community leaders who share information about things like this. If Derek has been making rounds with investment schemes, somebody's heard about it. Over the next 2 days, Pastor Williams' informal investigation revealed the disturbing scope of Derek's activities. He'd approached the owner of the soul food restaurant where Naomi's company held client dinners, suggesting a partnership opportunity that would expand the business. He'd talked to her insurance agent about opportunities in the property development sector. He'd even contacted the community college where Beverly had taught, pitching himself as someone who could help them modernize their business program. In every case, Derek had presented himself as Naomi's trusted partner, someone with her full endorsement and business backing. None of them had invested money, but several had given him information about their financial situations, business plans, and community connections. He was building a database, Simone explained when Naomi filled her in on Pastor Williams' discoveries. Mapping out every relationship and resource he could access through you. This wasn't just about stealing your money, it was about using your reputation to steal from everyone in your orbit. The realization that Derek's betrayal extended far beyond their personal relationship sent Naomi into a fury she hadn't known she possessed. Bad enough that he'd lied to her, used her, planned to steal from her. But involving her family, her church, her community in his schemes was a violation that cut deeper than personal heartbreak. We need to warn everyone, she told Simone. Everyone he approached, everyone he might approach. I can't let him use my name to hurt other people. Agreed. But we need to be strategic about it. If Derek realizes we're actively working against him, he might escalate his tactics. They developed a plan that was both practical and protective. Pastor Williams would quietly reach out to community leaders and business owners in their network, warning them about Derek's schemes without creating panic. Beverly would contact family members and close friends to make sure they understood Derek was no longer welcome or trusted. Grace would talk to her colleagues at the hospital to watch for anyone matching Derek's description trying to use Naomi's name for access or information. Meanwhile, Simone worked with Detective Crawford from the Financial Crimes Unit to document Derek's activities. While his schemes hadn't progressed far enough for major criminal charges, there was enough evidence of fraud attempts and misrepresentation to build a case if Derek tried to follow through on his threats. The good news, Detective Crawford explained during their meeting Friday afternoon, is that Derek Patterson isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He left a pretty clear trail of his activities and he made the mistake of threatening you in front of witnesses. What's the bad news? Men like Derek don't usually work alone, and they don't usually give up easily. If he's been planning this for 3 years, he's probably got backup plans and possibly accomplices we haven't identified yet. The detective's words stayed with Naomi through the weekend as she tried to process everything that had happened. In 1 week, her entire life had been turned upside down. Her engagement was over, her wedding canceled, her sense of safety and trust shattered. But something unexpected had emerged from the wreckage, a deeper appreciation for the people who truly loved her. Her mother's strength and fierce protectiveness. Grace's loyalty and practical support. Simone's unwavering friendship and legal expertise. Pastor Williams' wisdom and community connections. Even neighbors and acquaintances she barely knew had reached out with support, advice, and offers to help. Derek had seen her as isolated and desperate, easy prey for someone willing to offer companionship and affection. But he'd been wrong. Naomi wasn't alone. She was surrounded by a community of people who valued her, protected her, and would stand with her against anyone who tried to hurt her. Sunday afternoon, as she sat in her mother's garden helping Beverly deadhead the roses, Naomi felt something she hadn't expected to feel again so soon: hope. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said, watching her mother's careful hands tend to the plants. "What's that, sweetheart?" Derek's conversation with his mother. "He said I wasn't smart, that I was desperate, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Beverly paused in her work and looked at her daughter. "And? He was wrong about everything except the last part. I couldn't see what was right in front of me, but it wasn't his deception. It was all of this." Naomi gestured toward the house where Grace and Simone were inside preparing Sunday dinner, toward the neighborhood where Mrs. Jenkins was probably baking something delicious, toward the community that had rallied around her when she needed support. "I spent 3 years thinking Derek was the missing piece that would make my life complete," she continued. "But my life was already complete. I just couldn't see it because I was looking in the wrong direction." Beverly smiled and reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. "That's the smartest thing you've said all week." As the sun set over her mother's garden and the sounds of family conversation drifted through the kitchen windows, Naomi realized Derek had inadvertently given her a gift. In trying to expose her weaknesses, he'd revealed her strengths. In attempting to isolate her from her support system, he'd shown her how strong that system really was. She still had healing to do, trust to rebuild, and legal battles to fight. But for the first time since overhearing Derek's phone call, Naomi felt like herself again. Not the woman Derek had seen, but the woman she'd always been. Strong, smart, loved, protected, complete. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Naomi's apartment building. The doorman called up around 9 a.m., his voice carrying a note of concern. "Miss Thompson? There's a woman down here says she needs to speak with you about Derek Patterson. She seems pretty upset." Naomi's first instinct was to refuse the visit, but something in the doorman's tone made her pause. "What does she look like, Carlos?" "Young black woman, maybe late 20s? Professional looking, but she's been crying. Says her name is Tanya and that it's important." Against her better judgment, Naomi agreed to see the woman. 5 minutes later, she opened her door to find a petite woman with natural hair and red-rimmed eyes, clutching a manila folder to her chest like a shield. "Miss Thompson? I'm Tanya Mitchell. I think Derek Patterson might have done to you what he did to me." Naomi's blood went cold. She invited Tanya in, offering coffee and a seat on the couch while trying to process this new development. "Derek had another victim?" "I saw the announcement in the newspaper," Tanya began, her voice shaky. About your wedding being canceled. Then I did some research and found articles about your business online. When I saw the photos of Derek with you at those corporate events, I knew I had to come forward. She opened the manila folder and pulled out photographs. Derek at various social gatherings, always dressed well, always smiling, always with his arm around a different woman. But in these photos, the woman was Tanya. We were engaged for 2 years, Tanya continued. He told me he was a successful real estate developer, that he was just waiting for the right moment to expand his business. I supported him financially, emotionally, professionally. I introduced him to my family, my friends, my business contacts. What business are you in? Naomi asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. I own a small chain of beauty salons. 3 locations in Birmingham, Alabama. I built it from nothing, worked 16-hour days for 5 years to make it profitable. Tanya's voice cracked. Derek convinced me to take out loans against the business to fund his expansion plans. When I finally realized he was stealing from me, he'd taken almost $200,000. The parallels to her own situation were terrifying. When did this happen? He left me 6 months ago. Just disappeared one night with my jewelry, my electronics, and access to my business accounts. I've been tracking him ever since, following paper trails and social media posts. That's how I found out about you. Naomi felt sick. While she'd been planning her wedding and trusting Derek with her heart and her finances, he'd been living a double life, possibly planning to victimize her the same way he'd victimized Tanya. Tanya, she said carefully, how long were you together total? 3.5 years. He proposed after 18 months, said he wanted to wait until his business was more stable before we got married. Tanya laughed bitterly. I thought he was being responsible. Turns out he was buying time to clean me out completely. Did he ever mention his mother? Talk about taking care of her? Constantly. Said she was sick, needed expensive treatments. I even sent her money directly a few times when Derek said he was short on cash. Tanya paused. Why? Naomi told Tanya about the phone conversation she'd overheard, about Derek's promises to give his mother a better life with money stolen from their marriage. Tanya's expression grew darker with each detail. He's still running the same game, Tanya said grimly. The sick mother, the promises of a better life, the long engagement to build trust. The only difference is he got smarter about his approach. What do you mean? With me he moved too fast with the financial stuff. Started asking for loans and access to accounts within the first year. When I hesitated, he had to work harder to convince me. With you, he took his time, became part of your family and community first. That way, asking for financial access would seem natural. The sophisticated evolution of Derek's methods was chilling. He'd learned from his experience with Tanya and refined his approach for Naomi. It wasn't just personal betrayal, it was professional-level fraud. Tanya, you have to talk to the detective who's working my case. Your information could be crucial for stopping Derek from doing this to someone else. That's why I'm here. I want to see him prosecuted, but I also want to make sure you don't go through what I did. The financial damage was terrible, but the emotional destruction. Tanya's voice trailed off. How are you doing now? I mean, with the business and everything? I'm surviving. Had to close one location, lay off several employees. I'm rebuilding, but it's been hard. The worst part is how it affected my ability to trust people. I second-guess every relationship now, personal and professional. Naomi understood exactly what Tanya meant. The paranoia, the constant questioning of motivations, the fear that she'd been too naive to ever trust her judgment again. But looking at this strong woman who'd driven from Alabama to warn a stranger about a dangerous man, Naomi also saw something else: resilience. You know what strikes me about your story? Naomi said. You didn't let Derek destroy you. You lost money you had to rebuild, but you survived. And now you're here trying to protect someone else from going through the same thing. That's not the action of someone who's broken. Tears welled up in Tanya's eyes. Some days I don't feel very strong. Strength isn't about not feeling broken. It's about what you do when you are broken. And you're here fighting back, trying to stop him. That's everything. They spent the next 2 hours going through Tanya's documentation of Derek's fraud. She kept meticulous records. Bank statements, text messages, emails, photographs, even recordings of some of their conversations. Her business training had served her well in building a case against him. The detective working with me in Birmingham said Derek probably has multiple identities and multiple ongoing schemes, Tanya explained. He's not just an opportunistic con man, he's running an organized operation. Multiple identities? Different names, different social media profiles, different backstories. With me he was Derek Patterson, real estate developer. With you, he might have emphasized different aspects of his background. But it's all the same person running variations of the same scam. When Simone arrived that afternoon to meet with Detective Crawford, she brought both women to the police station. Crawford's expression grew increasingly grim as Tanya laid out her evidence. "Ms. Mitchell, this information changes everything," he said. "What we're looking at isn't simple fraud, it's organized financial crime, possibly part of a larger network. Derek Patterson may not even be his real name." "What does that mean for prosecution?" Naomi asked. "It means we need to involve federal authorities. This crosses state lines, involves identity fraud, and shows a pattern of organized criminal activity. It also means Derek is more dangerous than we initially thought." The detective's words sent a chill through Naomi. She'd been thinking of Derek as a selfish ex-fiancé who'd gotten greedy. Learning he was potentially part of a criminal network made his threats feel much more serious. "What do we do now?" Tanya asked. "You both need to be extremely careful. Change your routines, vary your schedules, make sure people know where you are. Don't meet with anyone claiming to be associated with Derek, and report any suspicious activity immediately." As they left the police station, Naomi felt a strange combination of fear and determination. Derek had escalated from personal betrayal to serious criminal threat, but she also had something she didn't have before, an ally who truly understood what she was going through. "Tanya," she said as they walked to the parking garage, "where are you staying while you're in town?" "I booked a hotel room for a couple of nights. I want to stay and work with the detective, make sure they have everything they need to build a case." "Cancel the hotel. Stay with me. We're stronger together, and frankly I could use the company of someone who really gets what this feels like." Tanya's grateful smile was answer enough. That evening, as they sat in Naomi's living room sharing takeout and war stories about Derek's manipulation tactics, Naomi realized something important. Derek had inadvertently connected her with someone who might become a real friend. Someone forged not in shared interests or convenience but in shared survival. "You know what's funny?" Tanya said, picking at her low mane. "Derek probably thought he was so smart, running the same scam in different cities, figuring we'd never find each other. But he underestimated us," Naomi replied. "He underestimated a lot of things. Our intelligence, our resources, our determination. And most importantly, he underestimated what happens when women like us decide to fight back." As if summoned by their conversation, Naomi's phone rang. Detective Crawford's name appeared on the screen. "Miss Thompson? We just got some interesting information. The FBI ran Derek Patterson's fingerprints through their database. His real name is David Paul Richardson, and he's wanted in connection with similar schemes in 3 other states." Naomi put the phone on speaker so Tanya could hear. "What kind of schemes?" Tanya asked. "Romance fraud, identity theft, business scams. He targets successful women, builds long-term relationships, then systematically steals their assets and moves to a new location with a new identity." "How many victims?" Naomi asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "At least 7 that we know of, possibly more. The FBI is setting up a task force to investigate the full scope of his operation. They want to meet with both of you tomorrow." After hanging up, Naomi and Tanya sat in stunned silence. 7 victims, possibly more. 7 women who'd had their hearts broken and their lives disrupted by the same man. "I feel sick," Tanya said finally. "I feel angry," Naomi replied. "Really, really angry." "Good. Anger is useful. Anger gets things done." Naomi looked at her new friend, this strong, smart woman who'd driven hours to warn a stranger about a dangerous man, and felt something she hadn't expected. Not just anger but power. Derek had made a crucial mistake in his calculations. He'd assumed his victims would stay isolated, ashamed, and silent. Instead, he'd created a network of women who were intelligent, resourceful, and furious. Women who were about to make his life very, very difficult. The FBI meeting the next morning took place in a sterile conference room that felt more like a corporate boardroom than a law enforcement facility. Agent Sarah Reeves, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, spread Derek's file across the table like a hand of cards revealing a losing game. "David Paul Richardson, aka Derek Patterson, aka Daniel Roberts, aka David Palmer," she began, pointing to different photographs and identification documents. 35 years old, originally from Memphis, Tennessee. He's been running romance and financial fraud schemes for at least 8 years, possibly longer. Naomi stared at the array of fake IDs, each bearing Derek's face but with different names, different backstories, different lives. The methodical nature of his deception was breathtaking in its scope and horrifying in its implications. "Agent Reeves," Tanya said, "how many victims are we talking about?" "Confirmed? 7 women across 5 states. But we suspect there are more who haven't come forward yet." Richardson is sophisticated. He targets successful women in mid to small-sized cities, builds deep relationships over years, then systematically drains their resources before moving on. Agent Reeves pulled out a map with red pins marking different locations. "Birmingham, Alabama, that's you, Ms. Mitchell. Atlanta, Georgia, that's you, Miss Thompson. But also Charlotte, North Carolina. Jacksonville, Florida. Nashville, Tennessee. Louisville, Kentucky. And we're investigating possible connections in 2 more cities." "Same pattern every time?" Naomi asked. "Variations on the same theme. He identifies successful businesswomen, often those who are single and might be vulnerable to romantic approaches. He creates detailed backstories that appeal to their specific situations. Sometimes he's a struggling entrepreneur, sometimes an established businessman looking for the right partner to settle down with." Agent Reeves opened another file. In Charlotte, he was Daniel Roberts, a restaurateur looking to expand his business. He targeted Maria Santos, who owned a successful catering company. 2-year engagement, stole nearly $300,000. In Jacksonville, he was David Palmer, a consulting firm owner. He targeted Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a pediatrician who'd inherited money from her parents. 18-month relationship, made off with her inheritance and her medical practice's equipment financing. Each story felt like a variation of Naomi's own experience, and she could see Tanya growing increasingly agitated as Agent Reeves continued. "What about his mother?" Tanya asked. "He told all of us about his sick mother who needed care. Helen Patterson, age 62, is indeed Richardson's mother. But she's not sick, she's his partner in crime. She helps him research targets, provides emotional support for his cover stories, and helps launder the money he steals." The revelation hit Naomi like a physical blow. The sweet, worried mother Derek had described, the woman he claimed to be supporting and caring for, she was part of the scam. Every conversation about his mother's needs, every mention of wanting to give her a better life, had been calculated manipulation. "So when he told me he was marrying me to give his mother a better life," Naomi said slowly, "he was literally telling the truth." "Exactly. Helen Patterson is living quite comfortably on the proceeds of her son's fraud. She's been evading taxes, moving money through various accounts, and helping him establish new identities when he relocates." Agent Reeves pulled out one more file. "Which brings us to why we need your help. Richardson and his mother have been careful, but they've made mistakes. Your documentation, Ms. Mitchell, combined with Ms. Thompson's evidence and testimony from the other victims, gives us enough to build a strong case. But we need more." "What kind of more?" Tanya asked. "We need Richardson to make a move that we can catch him in. He's still in Atlanta, still using the Derek Patterson identity, and according to our surveillance, he's angry about losing access to Ms. Thompson's assets. We think he might try to retaliate or continue his original plan through different means." "You want us to be bait," Naomi said flatly. "We want to give Richardson enough rope to hang himself. With your cooperation, we can set up controlled situations where he incriminates himself further. Phone calls, meetings, electronic communications, all monitored and recorded." Naomi looked at Tanya, who nodded slowly. "What would that look like?" "We'd have you reach out to Richardson, perhaps indicating you want to reconcile or that you've reconsidered his business proposals. We'd monitor all communications and be nearby for any in-person meetings. The goal is to get him on record making fraudulent offers or threats." "Is it safe?" Tanya asked. "We'll have teams positioned for any direct contact, and all electronic communications will be monitored in real time. Richardson's pattern shows he prefers manipulation to violence, but we'll take every precaution." After Agent Reeves left them to consider the proposal, Naomi and Tanya sat in the FBI parking lot processing what they'd learned. 7 victims, possibly more. An organized mother-son criminal enterprise. A man who'd built his entire adult life around finding successful women and systematically destroying their finances and emotional well-being. "I keep thinking about something," Tanya said, staring at the FBI building. "Derek, Richardson, whatever his name is, he didn't just steal our money. He stole years of our lives. Years we spent building relationships we thought were real, planning futures that were never going to happen. And 7 other women went through the same thing," Naomi added. "Are probably still going through it. That's what makes me want to do this FBI thing. Not just to get justice for us, but to stop him from doing it to woman number 8 or 9 or 10. Naomi thought about the other victims Agent Reeves had described. Maria Santos, the caterer in Charlotte. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the pediatrician in Jacksonville. Women who'd worked hard, built successful careers, opened their hearts to someone who'd seen them as nothing more than ATMs with emotions. If we do this, she said finally, we're not just representing ourselves. We're representing all of them. And all the ones he hasn't found yet, Tanya added. They spent the afternoon calling the other confirmed victims. With Agent Reeves' help, they were connected with Maria Santos and Dr. Jennifer Hayes, both of whom were eager to participate in bringing Richardson to justice. The other 3 victims were initially hesitant but agreed to provide support and testimony. That evening, back at Naomi's apartment, they planned their strategy with Simone and Detective Crawford, who was working closely with the FBI task force. The key is to make Richardson believe he still has a chance with at least one of you, Detective Crawford explained. Men like him are narcissists. They can't believe their victims would outsmart them or work together against them. So who makes contact first? Naomi asked. You do, Simone said. You're the most recent victim, the one whose plan got disrupted. If anyone were to have second thoughts or be willing to reconcile, it would logically be you. They crafted a text message that struck the right balance of hurt, confusion, and potential openness. Derek, I've been thinking about everything that happened. Maybe we both said things we didn't mean. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm not ready to throw away 3 years either. I need some time to process, but I wanted you to know I'm not closing the door completely. It was manipulative, designed to feed Richardson's ego and his belief that he could still salvage his plan with Naomi. But it was also true enough that she could deliver it convincingly. She wasn't entirely closing the door, just opening it for the FBI to walk through. Once he responds, Agent Reeves explained over the phone, we'll guide the conversation toward getting him to make specific offers or admissions. We need him on record making fraudulent business propositions or revealing knowledge of his other schemes. Naomi sent the text message at 8 p.m. on Thursday evening. Richardson responded within 30 minutes. Baby, I've been hoping you'd reach out. I know things got heated and I said some things I didn't mean. You mean everything to me. Can we meet somewhere neutral to talk? I want to explain everything and make this right. Even knowing it was lies, even understanding his manipulation tactics, Naomi felt a small flutter of the old hope she'd once felt when Derek seemed to care about her feelings. The power of his deception was subtle but strong. He knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. Not yet, she texted back. I need to understand what happened. You said things about me, about us, about money that I can't unhear. If we're going to work through this, I need honesty. I can explain everything. Those phone calls you heard, you didn't hear the full context. I was frustrated and said things wrong, but my feelings for you are real. Let me show you. Agent Reeves, monitoring the conversation in real time, sent Naomi a message through a separate secure channel. Good. He's taking the bait. Push for specifics about his explanation. What context could make those words okay? Naomi texted. You talked about taking my money, about me being desperate, about not being smart. How do you explain that away? Meet me for coffee tomorrow and I'll explain everything. There are things about my situation you don't understand, pressures I've been under. I was trying to protect you, not hurt you. The response was perfect, vague enough to avoid specifics over text, but promising revelations that would presumably justify his behavior. Richardson was walking directly into their trap, led by his own arrogance and his underestimation of Naomi's intelligence. Where? She texted back. The cafe where we had our first date. 2 p.m. Just the two of us, no lawyers or family. Give me 1 hour to explain everything. As Naomi confirmed the meeting, she felt a mixture of anticipation and disgust. In less than 24 hours, she'd be sitting across from Richardson again, pretending to consider reconciliation while federal agents recorded every word of his attempted manipulation. You sure you're ready for this? Tanya asked, watching Naomi's face carefully. I'm ready to end this, Naomi replied. For all of us. The game was set. Tomorrow Derek Patterson, David Paul Richardson, would sit down for what he thought was a reconciliation meeting with a woman he'd underestimated. Instead, he'd be walking into a trap set by 7 women who'd decided they were done being victims. The cafe where Naomi and Derek had their first date looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. Exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, the smell of espresso and fresh pastries. But everything else had changed completely. Naomi arrived 15 minutes early, giving the FBI surveillance team time to position themselves throughout the space. Agent Reeves sat at a corner table disguised as a freelance writer working on her laptop. Two other agents posed as a couple having an intimate conversation at a booth near the back. Detective Crawford waited in an unmarked van outside, monitoring all communications through the wire Naomi wore beneath her sweater. At exactly 2 p.m., Derek walked through the front door, and Naomi felt her chest tighten with a mixture of familiar attraction and newfound revulsion. He looked the same, tall, handsome, impeccably dressed in the expensive clothes she now realized her money had probably purchased. But knowing who he really was, seeing him through the lens of Agent Reeves' files and Tanya's testimony, transformed him from the man she'd loved into something predatory and dangerous. He spotted her immediately and approached with the confident smile that had once made her heart race. Now it made her skin crawl. "Naomi," he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek as if nothing had happened. "You look beautiful." "Hello, Derek," she replied, maintaining the careful balance of hurt and possibility that she'd practiced with the FBI team. He settled into the seat across from her, reaching across the table as if to take her hand. She pulled back slightly, not enough to seem completely hostile but enough to maintain distance. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he began. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to understand what really happened that night." "I'm listening." Derek launched into what was clearly a prepared speech, full of half-truths and emotional manipulation. He explained that the phone conversation she'd overheard was taken out of context, that he'd been trying to reassure his mother who was worried about their relationship moving too fast. "She's old-fashioned," he said with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "She was concerned that you might think I was only interested in your success, not you as a person. So I was overcompensating, trying to convince her that wasn't true by talking about how your intelligence and business sense attracted me." It was a skillful reversal, turning his insult about her intelligence into a compliment, reframing his mother's concerns as protectiveness rather than criminal partnership. If Naomi hadn't known the truth about Helen Patterson's role in his schemes, she might have found the explanation plausible. "What about the part where you talked about taking my money?" she asked. Derek's expression shifted to wounded sincerity. "Baby, I said, take care of everything, not take everything. I was talking about wanting to handle the financial responsibilities in our marriage so you could focus on your business without worrying about household management." Another skillful manipulation, turning theft into traditional gender roles and financial partnership. Naomi could see why Richardson had been so successful for so long. His lies contained just enough truth to seem believable, especially to someone who wanted to believe them. "And the part about the prenup?" she pressed. "I said there were ways around prenups when you know what you're doing, meaning communication, compromise, working together as partners instead of adversaries. I wasn't talking about legal loopholes, I was talking about emotional ones." Derek reached across the table again, this time catching her hand before she could pull away. "Naomi, I love you. I know how that conversation sounded, but you have to understand the pressure I've been under. My mother's medical bills, the stress of planning our future, wanting to be worthy of everything you've accomplished." He paused, letting emotion build in his voice. "Maybe I did say some things wrong. Maybe my pride made me sound like I didn't respect your intelligence or your success. But the core truth is that I want to spend my life with you, building something real together." It was a masterful performance, and Naomi could feel the familiar tug of wanting to believe him. Even knowing everything she knew, part of her still responded to Derek's charm, his apparent vulnerability, his declarations of love. But Agent Reeves had coached her on exactly how to respond. "I want to believe you, Derek. But I need more than explanations. I need to understand what our future would really look like." "What do you mean?" "I mean practically. How would we handle money? How would we make decisions about my business? How would we deal with your mother's medical expenses?" Derek's eyes lit up, sensing an opening. "Well, obviously we'd combine our resources. Marriage is about partnership, sharing everything. Your business expertise combined with my real estate knowledge could create amazing opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "I've been researching some development projects that would be perfect for your company's expansion. Mixed-use developments that need technology infrastructure, residential projects that could use smart home integration. The profit potential is enormous." He pulled out his phone and showed her what looked like professional development proposals. "I've already had preliminary discussions with some investors who are very interested in partnering with someone of your caliber." Naomi felt her pulse quicken, but not with excitement, with recognition. This was exactly the pattern Agent Reeves had described. Richardson identified business opportunities that seemed legitimate on the surface but were actually vehicles for him to access and redirect his victims' resources. These look impressive, she said carefully. Who are the investors? A consortium of real estate developers and tech entrepreneurs. They're looking for someone with your background to lead the technology integration aspects of their projects. Would I need to invest my own capital up front? Some initial investment would show good faith, demonstrate your commitment to the partnership. But the returns would be substantial. We're talking about tripling your current business value within 2 years. There it was, the hook that had probably ensnared multiple victims. Legitimate-sounding business opportunities that required significant upfront investment, promising returns that were too good to be true. How much initial investment? Naomi asked. Derek leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. Between 400,000 and 600,000, depending on how many projects we want to participate in simultaneously. Naomi felt nauseated. $400,000 to $600,000? Nearly everything she had in liquid assets. If she'd married Derek as planned, if she trusted him with joint access to her accounts, he could have cleaned her out completely and disappeared, just as he had with Tanya and the others. That's a lot of money, Derek. It's an investment in our future, baby. In the life we want to build together. And with your mother's house as additional collateral. My mother's house? Well, if we're combining assets for maximum leverage. Beverly's house is paid off, right? In a good neighborhood? That kind of equity could secure additional funding for even bigger opportunities. The casual way he suggested putting her mother's home at risk made Naomi's blood boil. But she forced herself to maintain her cover, to keep drawing out his admissions. You've really thought this through, she said. I've thought about nothing else since our fight. I want to prove to you that I'm worthy of your trust, that I can contribute equally to our partnership. Derek's phone buzzed with a text message, and he glanced at it quickly before putting the device face down on the table. But not before Naomi caught a glimpse of the sender's name. Mom. Is everything okay? She asked. Just my mother checking on how things are going. She's been worried about us. What did you tell her about our situation? Derek's expression became carefully neutral. I told her we hit a rough patch but that I was confident we could work through it. She's very fond of you, you know. She's been looking forward to having you as a daughter-in-law. The lies came so smoothly, so naturally. Helen Patterson wasn't fond of Naomi. She was probably calculating her cut of the money they planned to steal. But Derek delivered the deception with such apparent sincerity that Naomi could see how he'd fooled so many intelligent women for so long. I'd like to meet with her, Naomi said suddenly. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, I think I should talk to your mother directly. Derek's composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of panic that he quickly covered with a smile. That's sweet of you, baby, but she's not feeling well right now. Maybe in a few weeks, once things settle down. Is she in the hospital? I could visit her there. No, she's at home. Just tired, you know? The treatments take a lot out of her. Naomi nodded sympathetically while making a mental note that Derek was still maintaining the fiction of his mother's illness, even in what he believed was a private reconciliation conversation. Derek, she said, changing tactics, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Have you ever been married before? Or engaged to anyone else? The question seemed to catch Derek off guard. Why would you ask that? Because I need to know if I'm the first woman you've made these kinds of promises to. I need to know if this pattern of business partnerships and combined assets is something you've tried before. Derek's voice took on a slightly harder edge. What pattern? What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Have you been engaged before? Naomi, you're starting to sound paranoid. This conversation was supposed to be about us working through our problems, not about you interrogating me like I'm a criminal. The word criminal hung in the air between them, and Naomi realized Derek had made a crucial mistake. Nothing in their conversation had suggested criminal activity, unless he was thinking about criminal activity. I never said anything about criminal behavior, she said quietly. I just asked about previous engagements. Derek realized his slip immediately, but it was too late. His expression shifted, becoming colder and more calculating. What is this really about, Naomi? Why all the questions? Why does this feel like a setup? The conversation had reached its tipping point. Derek's instincts were finally kicking in, warning him that something was wrong. Naomi could see him reassessing the situation, looking around the cafe with new suspicion. It's not a setup, she said, trying to maintain her cover a little longer. I'm trying to decide whether to trust you again, and I need honest answers. But Derek was done playing the reconciliation game. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that had lost all warmth. You know what, Naomi? I think we're done here. You clearly don't want to work things out, you want to play detective. That's fine. But don't expect me to sit here and be interrogated by someone who's already made up her mind. He started to stand, but Naomi made one last attempt to draw out useful admissions. Wait, she said. What about the investment opportunities? What about building a future together? Derek paused, and for a moment she thought he might sit back down. Instead, he leaned over and spoke in a voice so low that only she could hear. You want to know the truth, Naomi? The truth is that you're not as smart as you think you are. You had a chance to be part of something bigger than your little software company and your boring, predictable life. But you're too paranoid, too controlling, too afraid to take risks. He straightened up, his voice returning to normal volume. Good luck with your safe little world. I hope it makes you happy. As Derek walked toward the cafe exit, Naomi felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that she no longer had to pretend to consider reconciliation with a man who'd planned to destroy her financially. Disappointment that they hadn't gotten more incriminating admissions on record. But Agent Reeves caught her eye from across the cafe and gave a subtle nod that indicated they'd gotten enough. Derek's admissions about the investment schemes, his knowledge of her mother's house, his slip about criminal activity, and his final bitter revelation of his true feelings, all of it was recorded and would be useful in building the case against him. As federal agents discreetly followed Derek out of the cafe, Naomi sat alone at the table where their relationship had begun 3 years ago. But she wasn't the same woman who'd been charmed by a handsome stranger's attention. She was stronger now, wiser, and surrounded by people who truly cared about her well-being. Most importantly, she was no longer Derek Patterson's victim. She was the woman who'd helped bring down David Paul Richardson's criminal operation. And that felt better than any relationship ever could. 2 weeks after the cafe meeting, Naomi woke up to her phone buzzing with calls from Agent Reeves, Detective Crawford, and Simone. The coordinated timing meant only one thing: something big had happened with the Richardson case. She answered Simone's call first. Please tell me this is good news. It's very good news. They got him, Naomi. Richardson and his mother were arrested this morning in Memphis. They're being charged with federal fraud, money laundering, and organized criminal activity across multiple states. Naomi sank onto her couch, feeling a relief so profound it made her dizzy. What happened? How did they find them? Remember how Richardson got paranoid and left the cafe early? Apparently, that spooked him enough that he decided to cut and run. But the FBI was monitoring his communications and tracking his movements. When he and his mother tried to flee to Mexico yesterday, they were arrested at the Atlanta airport. Agent Reeves called 20 minutes later to fill in the details. Richardson's arrogance finally caught up with him. After your meeting, he contacted his mother and told her they needed to liquidate their assets and disappear. But they got greedy. Instead of leaving immediately, they tried to access funds from bank accounts that were already under federal surveillance. What happens now? Now we build the strongest possible case using testimony from all 7 confirmed victims, plus evidence we've gathered about their operation. Richardson's looking at significant federal prison time, and his mother will likely face charges as an accomplice. Over the following weeks, Naomi found herself deeply involved in the legal process, working with prosecutors to document Richardson's methods and the impact of his crimes. The other victims, Tanya Maria Santos, Dr. Jennifer Hayes, and 3 others, formed an unofficial support network, sharing information and encouraging each other through the complex process of seeking justice. It's strange, Tanya said during one of their regular phone calls, but working on this case has been therapeutic. Like we're taking back our power from him. Naomi understood exactly what she meant. 4 months after discovering Derek's betrayal, she'd felt like a victim, someone who'd been fooled, used, and discarded. But participating in his prosecution transformed her into something else entirely, a survivor who'd fought back and won. The trial began 6 months later, drawing significant media attention as details of Richardson's elaborate schemes became public. Naomi testified for 2 days, describing how Richardson had infiltrated her life and gained access to her resources, family, and community connections. He didn't just steal money, she told the jury during her victim impact statement. He stole years of our lives. He stole our ability to trust, our sense of safety, our belief in love and partnership. But most importantly for this case, he stole our financial security and used our reputations to target others in our communities. Richardson's defense attorney tried to portray him as a man who'd made poor choices in relationships rather than a calculated criminal, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, recorded conversations, testimony from 7 victims across 5 states, and documentation of fake identities painted a clear picture of organized fraud. Helen Patterson, Richardson's mother, accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against her son. Her testimony revealed the full scope of their operation, how they researched potential victims, created detailed backstories, and systematically drained their targets' resources before moving to new locations. David was always charming, she testified, but he was also angry. Angry that he hadn't been born into wealth, angry that he had to work for things other people seemed to have easily. These women represented everything he felt entitled to but couldn't earn honestly. The revelation that Richardson's crimes were motivated by entitlement rather than desperation made them somehow worse. He hadn't stolen because he was desperate or disadvantaged. He'd stolen because he believed successful women owed him their resources. During cross-examination, Richardson's attorney asked Helen Patterson why she'd participated in her son's crimes. "Because I wanted a better life too," she admitted. And David made it seem like these women had so much money they wouldn't really miss what he took. It was a chilling admission that revealed the complete lack of empathy both mother and son had for their victims. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all federal charges. Richardson was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. Helen Patterson received 3 years and was ordered to forfeit all assets purchased with stolen money. The day of sentencing, Naomi attended court with Tanya Maria Santos and Dr. Jennifer Hayes. As Richardson was led away in handcuffs, he turned to look at them one final time. The charming facade that had fooled so many women was gone, replaced by undisguised anger and resentment. "You all think you've won something," he called out before the bailiff silenced him. "But you're still the same lonely, desperate women I found. You're still going to die alone." His final words were meant to hurt, to leave them with doubt and insecurity. Instead, they had the opposite effect. Naomi looked around at the 3 women standing beside her, brilliant, successful, resilient survivors who'd turned their pain into power, and realized Richardson was wrong about everything. They weren't lonely or desperate. They were connected to each other and to communities of people who valued them for who they truly were. They'd survived his worst attempts to break them and emerged stronger than before. "No," Dr. Hayes called back, "we're women who are finally free." Outside the courthouse, the 4 women stood together in the afternoon sunshine, processing the end of a legal journey that had taken nearly 2 years to complete. "So what happens now?" Maria Santos asked. "Now we get our lives back," Tanya replied. "Really back, not just practically but emotionally." "I keep thinking about something," Naomi said. "Richardson told each of us we weren't smart enough to see what was right in front of us. And in a way he was right, but not the way he meant." "What do you mean?" Dr. Hayes asked. "I couldn't see that I was already complete before I met him. I couldn't see that I was surrounded by people who truly loved and valued me. I couldn't see my own worth clearly enough to recognize his deception immediately." Naomi paused, looking at each of her fellow survivors. "But now I can see all of that. And I can see something else he never understood. Women like us don't stay down when we fall. We get back up and we help each other rise." As they prepared to return to their respective cities and rebuild their lives, Naomi felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about her future. Not because she was hoping someone else would complete her life, but because she finally understood that her life was already complete. That evening, back in her apartment, Naomi sat in her home office working on her latest software project. A platform designed to help people identify and report financial fraud. She'd started the project as therapy, a way to channel her anger and pain into something useful. Now it was becoming a real business venture that could help protect other people from predators like Richardson. Her phone rang as she was coding a particularly complex security feature. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mama. How was your day?" "Wonderful, sweetheart. Mrs. Jenkins and I went to that new art exhibit downtown, then stopped by the farmer's market. How are you feeling after today's sentencing?" "Relieved," Naomi said honestly. "And proud. We did something important, Mama. We stopped him from hurting anyone else. I'm so proud of you, baby. Not just for today but for how you've handled everything. You could have let that man break you, but instead you grew stronger." "I had good teachers," Naomi replied, thinking about her mother's resilience in raising 2 daughters alone, her sister's fierce loyalty, her friends' unwavering support. After hanging up with her mother, Naomi returned to her coding with renewed energy. She was building something that mattered, creating tools that could protect vulnerable people from sophisticated predators. But more than that, she was building a future that belonged entirely to her. Funded by her own success, supported by people who loved her authentically, and grounded in self-knowledge that no one could shake. Richardson had been wrong about everything, but especially about one crucial point. Naomi Thompson was smart enough to see what was right in front of her. She just hadn't been looking in the right direction before. Now she was, and the view was beautiful. 6 months after Richardson's sentencing, Naomi's life had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and entirely new. Her fraud detection software had evolved from a therapeutic project into a legitimate business venture, attracting interest from financial institutions and law enforcement agencies. More importantly, she'd found a sense of peace and self-confidence that had nothing to do with external validation. The support network she'd formed with Richardson's other victims had also evolved into genuine friendships. Tanya had relocated her beauty salon business to Atlanta, drawn by the city's entrepreneurial opportunities and the chance to stay connected with Naomi and the legal team. They met for coffee every Tuesday, sharing business advice and celebrating each other's victories. "You know what's funny?" Tanya said during one of their regular coffee dates. "Richardson thought he was isolating us, making us vulnerable by separating us from our support systems. Instead, he created a network of women who understand each other in ways most friends never could." It was true. The bonds forged through shared survival had a depth that ordinary friendships took years to develop. They could communicate with glances, offer support without being asked, and celebrate victories with people who truly understood the journey from victim to survivor. On a Thursday morning in late spring, Naomi was in her office testing a new feature of her fraud detection software when her assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Thompson? There's someone here to see you." Says his name is Marcus Washington, and he's with the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force. Naomi's first thought was that something had happened with Richardson's case, perhaps an appeal or new charges. But when Marcus Washington entered her office, she realized this was something different entirely. Agent Washington was tall and scholarly looking, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an easy smile that immediately put her at ease. He was also, she noticed, about her age and wearing a wedding ring. "Miss Thompson, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I'm Agent Washington, and I'm here because of your fraud detection software. Is there a problem with it?" "Quite the opposite. We've been testing your platform through a partnership with one of the banks Richardson targeted, and the results are remarkable. Your software identified 3 separate fraud attempts that traditional banking security missed." Naomi felt a flutter of professional pride. "That's wonderful to hear. We designed it specifically to catch the kind of sophisticated schemes that slip through standard detection methods. Which is exactly why I'm here. The FBI is looking to partner with technology companies that can help us identify and prevent financial crimes before they destroy people's lives. Your software, combined with your unique insight into how these crimes actually work, makes you an ideal partner." Over the next hour, Agent Washington explained the FBI's initiative to work with private sector companies in combating financial fraud. They were particularly interested in Naomi's software because it had been designed by someone who'd experienced fraud firsthand, giving it a practical understanding that purely technical solutions often lacked. "We're not just looking for a vendor relationship," he explained. "We want a true partnership. Someone who can help us understand the emotional and psychological aspects of financial crimes, not just the technical ones." As they discussed the potential collaboration, Naomi found herself impressed by Agent Washington's approach. Unlike Agent Reeves, who'd been focused primarily on law enforcement outcomes, Washington seemed to understand the broader impact of financial crimes on victims and communities. "Can I ask you something?" Naomi said during a pause in their conversation. "What got you interested in financial crimes? Most FBI agents I've met seem drawn to more dramatic cases." Agent Washington smiled, and Naomi caught a glimpse of something personal beneath his professional demeanor. "My grandmother was victimized by a romance scammer when I was in college. Lost her entire retirement savings to a man who convinced her he was going to marry her and take her traveling around the world." "I'm sorry. That must have been devastating for your family." "It was. But what really got to me was how the crime affected her sense of self. She'd been this confident, independent woman who'd raised 5 children as a single mother and run her own business for 30 years. After the scam, she second-guessed every decision, trusted no one, became afraid of her own judgment." Naomi recognized the description immediately, the erosion of self-confidence that came with financial victimization, the way predators didn't just steal money but also stole their victims' sense of competence and worth. "Is that why you specialize in these cases?" "Partly. But also because I believe prevention is more powerful than prosecution. Don't get me wrong, Putting criminals like Richardson in prison matters, but stopping them before they destroy someone's life matters more. The conversation continued for another hour, covering technical specifications, partnership structures, and implementation timelines. But underneath the professional discussion, Naomi found herself enjoying Marcus Washington's company in a way she hadn't enjoyed a man's company since before meeting Derek. He was intelligent without being condescending, passionate about his work without being obsessive, and genuinely interested in her perspective rather than trying to impress her with his own expertise. When he mentioned his grandmother again, Naomi caught herself wondering about his family situation. "Agent Washington," she said as their meeting concluded, "you mentioned your grandmother earlier. How is she doing now?" His expression softened. "She passed away 2 years ago, but she'd recovered most of her confidence by then. Started a support group for older adults who'd been targeted by scams. Turned her experience into something that helped other people. She sounds like an amazing woman." She was. She always said the best way to heal from being hurt is to help other people avoid the same pain. The sentiment resonated deeply with Naomi's own journey from victim to advocate. "That's actually why I started working on the fraud detection software. I wanted to turn what happened to me into something useful." "It's more than useful," Agent Washington said. "It's revolutionary. And I think our partnership could help protect thousands of people." As he prepared to leave, Agent Washington handed her his business card with a slightly uncertain expression. "Miss Thompson, I hope this isn't inappropriate given our professional relationship, but would you be interested in continuing this conversation over dinner? I mean, discussing the partnership in a more relaxed setting?" Naomi felt her old instincts kick in, the immediate assumption that any professional man showing personal interest must have ulterior motives. But then she looked at Marcus Washington's honest face, thought about his grandmother's story, and realized something important. Not every man who expressed interest in her was a predator. Not every professional relationship that included personal attraction was automatically suspect. She could trust her judgment while still being appropriately cautious. "I'd like that," she said. "But full disclosure, I'm very recently out of a relationship that ended badly. I'm not looking for anything serious right now." "Full disclosure back," Marcus replied with a smile. "I'm recently divorced and also not looking for anything serious. But I'd enjoy getting to know the person behind the brilliant software if you're open to that." They arranged to meet the following Friday at a restaurant neither of them had been to before, neutral territory that wouldn't carry memories or expectations. As Marcus left her office, Naomi realized she was looking forward to the dinner in a way that had nothing to do with business partnerships or professional advancement. She was looking forward to spending time with someone who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, her experiences, and her perspectives. Someone who understood the importance of her work because he'd seen its necessity firsthand. Someone who approached both his career and personal life with integrity and genuine care for others. That evening, when she called her mother to tell her about the potential FBI partnership, Beverly immediately picked up on her daughter's excitement. "This sounds like a wonderful opportunity, sweetheart. But you sound different, happier than you have in months. Is there something else you want to tell me?" Naomi found herself smiling. "Maybe. There's an FBI agent who's very professional and seems very nice, and we're having dinner to discuss the partnership." "Just the partnership?" "Mostly the partnership," Naomi admitted. "But maybe not entirely." "Good," Beverly said firmly. "It's time you started believing that good men exist, that you deserve someone who sees your worth and respects your intelligence." "I'm not ready for anything serious, Mama. I'm still healing from Derek Richardson, whatever his name was." "Healing doesn't mean hiding, baby. It means learning to trust your judgment while still being open to good things that come your way." As Naomi hung up the phone, she reflected on how much had changed in the past year. She'd gone from planning a wedding to a man who'd seen her as a mark, to building a business that could protect others from similar predators, to potentially collaborating with law enforcement in ways that could have national impact. More importantly, she'd learned to see herself clearly, not as the desperate woman Richardson had described, not as the incomplete person who needed someone else to validate her worth, but as the strong, intelligent, capable woman she'd always been. She was ready to build professional partnerships based on mutual respect and shared goals. She was ready to explore personal connections that honored her intelligence and appreciated her experiences. She was ready to trust her own judgment while remaining appropriately careful. Most of all, she was ready to believe that the best parts of her life were still ahead of her. And that belief, she realized, was the most powerful protection against predators like Richardson. The knowledge that she was complete, valuable, and worthy of genuine love and respect exactly as she was. 1 year later, Naomi stood in the same garden where Derek had proposed to her, but everything about the scene was different. Instead of being alone with a man who'd seen her as a target, she was surrounded by people who truly loved and valued her. Her mother, her sister Grace, Simone, Tanya, and Marcus, who'd become not just a business partner but a dear friend whose respect and affection she'd earned authentically. They were celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Richardson's sentencing and the official launch of Naomi's expanded fraud detection company, now called Safeguard Solutions, which had partnered with law enforcement agencies in 12 states to prevent financial crimes. "I want to make a toast," Beverly said, raising her glass of lemonade. "To my daughter, who turned the worst thing that ever happened to her into something that protects other people. To survivors who become warriors," Tanya added, clinking her glass against Naomi's. "To women who refuse to let anyone else define their worth," Grace continued. "To friendship that was forged in fire and became stronger than steel," Simone said, wrapping her arm around Naomi's shoulders. Marcus raised his own glass with a smile that had become wonderfully familiar over the past months. "To Naomi, who taught me that the strongest people are those who've been broken and chose to heal rather than hide." As they drank their toast, Naomi felt a profound sense of completion that had nothing to do with romance or external validation. She'd built something meaningful from pain, turned betrayal into purpose, and discovered that her capacity for love and trust hadn't been destroyed by Richardson's deception. It had been refined and strengthened. Her relationship with Marcus had developed slowly and carefully over the past year. They'd started as professional collaborators, become genuine friends, and gradually discovered a romantic connection built on mutual respect, shared values, and authentic affection. Unlike her relationship with Derek, which had been based on desperation and hope, her connection with Marcus was grounded in self-knowledge and choice. "You know what I realized today?" Naomi said to the group gathered in her mother's garden. "Richardson was right about one thing: I couldn't see what was right in front of me when we first met." The group looked puzzled, so she continued. "I couldn't see that I was already surrounded by love. I couldn't see that my life was already full of meaning and purpose. I couldn't see that I was complete exactly as I was. I was so focused on what I thought I was missing that I couldn't appreciate what I already had." She looked around at each face in the circle: her mother, who'd raised 2 daughters with strength and wisdom; her sister, whose fierce loyalty had never wavered; her best friend, who'd dropped everything to support her through the crisis; Tanya, who'd become a true sister in survival; and Marcus, who'd shown her that good men did exist and that she was worthy of their respect and affection. "But I can see it all clearly now," she continued. "And I understand something Richardson never could. Real love doesn't make you desperate or grateful or willing to ignore red flags. Real love makes you stronger, clearer, more yourself than you've ever been." Grace wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm so proud of who you've become through all this." "I'm proud of who I've always been," Naomi replied. "I just needed to learn how to see myself clearly." As the afternoon turned to evening and her friends and family shared stories and laughter, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her first instinct was concern. Richardson was in federal prison, but she still occasionally received messages from people claiming to be connected to his case. But this message was different. "Miss Thompson, my name is Sarah Chin and I'm writing to thank you. Your fraud detection software prevented me from losing my life savings to a romance scammer last month. The bank flagged unusual activity on my account and connected me with resources to verify that the man I'd been dating was using a fake identity. I wanted you to know that your work saved my life in every way that matters. Thank you for turning your pain into protection for others." Naomi showed the message to Marcus, who smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd helped create something meaningful. "That's the 15th message like this we've received this month," he said. "Your software has prevented over $2 million in fraud losses just in the past 6 months. "Our software," Naomi corrected. "This partnership has been about more than technology. It's been about understanding how these crimes actually impact people's lives." As the celebration wound down and her guests began to leave, Naomi walked Marcus to his car, enjoying the familiar comfort of his presence beside her. "Can I tell you something?" she said as they reached his car. "Always. A year ago I thought my life was over. I thought I'd been too stupid to ever trust my judgment again, too damaged to ever love or be loved authentically. And now I know that was never true. Richardson didn't damage me. He revealed strengths I didn't know I had. He didn't end my story, he just ended a chapter one needed to close anyway. Marcus leaned against his car, studying her face in the soft evening light. What do you think the next chapter holds? I don't know, Naomi admitted. But for the first time in my life that doesn't scare me. Whether it's expanding Safeguard solutions internationally, or deepening my relationships with the people I love, or maybe someday trusting someone enough to build a life with them. She paused, meeting his eyes directly. I know that whatever comes next will be my choice, based on my values, guided by people who genuinely care about my well-being. That sounds like a pretty wonderful chapter, Marcus said softly. I think so too. As Marcus drove away and Naomi walked back toward her mother's house, she passed the spot in the garden where Derek had proposed to her with words of false love and a ring that represented nothing but calculated deception. But instead of feeling pain at the memory, she felt gratitude. Gratitude that she'd discovered the truth before it was too late. Gratitude for the strength she'd found in herself and the love she'd received from others. Gratitude for the opportunity to turn her experience into protection for people like Sarah Chin, who might have lost everything if not for the lessons Naomi had learned from her own near-miss with disaster. Most of all, gratitude for the clear vision she now had of her own worth, her own completeness, and her own capacity for wisdom, love, and joy. Derek Patterson, David Paul Richardson, had been wrong about everything that mattered. She wasn't desperate or stupid or incomplete. She was strong, intelligent, valuable, and surrounded by authentic love. And as she rejoined her family in the garden where she'd once been deceived by false promises, Naomi Thompson knew with absolute certainty that her best days were not behind her. They were just beginning. 2 years after Richardson's conviction, Naomi stood in her bathroom getting ready for what she knew would be one of the most important evenings of her life. But unlike the anxious preparation she'd done for her cancelled wedding to Derek, this time she felt calm, confident, and completely certain of her choices. Marcus had asked her to dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same place where they'd had their first non-business conversation 3 years ago. Over the months, it had become their unofficial anniversary spot, where they celebrated professional victories, personal milestones, and the steady deepening of their relationship. Tonight felt different though. Marcus had been unusually nervous all week, and when she teasingly asked why, he just smiled and said she'd understand soon enough. As she chose a dress, not because she was trying to be someone else, but because she loved how it made her feel, Naomi reflected on how much her understanding of love had changed. With Derek, love had felt desperate and grateful, like she'd won a prize she didn't deserve and might lose at any moment. With Marcus, love felt solid and joyful, like coming home to herself while also discovering new parts of who she could become with the right partner. Her phone rang as she was applying lipstick. Tanya's name appeared on the screen. Girl, are you ready for tonight? Tanya asked without preamble. Ready for what? It's just dinner. Naomi Thompson, do not play innocent with me. Marcus has been asking Simone about ring sizes and your favorite flowers. This is not just dinner. Naomi's heart fluttered with excitement rather than anxiety. If Marcus was planning to propose tonight, she knew exactly what her answer would be, not because she was desperate to be married, but because she'd found a man who saw and loved her exactly as she was. Are you scared? Tanya asked, her voice gentler. No, Naomi said, surprised by how true that was. 3 years ago I would have been terrified. But this is completely different. How so? Derek proposed because he thought it would give him access to my assets. Marcus would be proposing because he wants to build a life with me. Derek saw me as a mark. Marcus sees me as a partner. Derek's proposal was about what he could take from me. Marcus's would be about what we could create together. And you trust that judgment? I trust myself, Naomi said firmly. I know who I am, what I'm worth, and what kind of relationship I deserve. And I know Marcus well enough to be certain that he values those same things. When she arrived at the restaurant, Marcus was already there, looking handsome but unmistakably nervous in his best suit. He stood when he saw her, and the expression on his face, pure admiration and affection, made her feel beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with external validation. You look incredible, he said, kissing her cheek as he held out her chair. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, settling into her seat. Though you seem a little nervous. Everything okay? More than okay, Marcus said, but his hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. They ordered dinner and chatted about work, family, and weekend plans, but Naomi could sense Marcus building up to something. Finally, as they finished their dessert, he reached across the table and took her hands. Naomi, there's something I need to tell you. Okay, she said, trying not to smile at his serious expression. When I first met you, It was because of your software, because of the brilliant way you turned your experience into something that could protect other people. I was impressed by your intelligence, your innovation, your dedication to preventing others from suffering what you'd gone through." He paused, gathering his courage. "But as I got to know you, really know you, I realized that your professional brilliance was just one part of who you are. You're also incredibly kind, funny, thoughtful, and strong in ways that have nothing to do with work or success." Naomi felt tears starting to gather in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "You've taught me that love isn't about finding someone to complete you, it's about finding someone who appreciates the person you already are while inspiring you to become even more yourself." Marcus let go of her hands and slipped out of his chair, dropping to one knee beside their table. The other restaurant patrons began to notice, but Naomi barely saw them. Her focus was entirely on the man kneeling beside her, holding a ring that caught the candlelight beautifully. "Naomi Thompson," he said, his voice steady despite his nervousness, "you are the smartest, strongest, most amazing woman I've ever known. You're complete exactly as you are, but I would be honored to spend my life loving you, supporting your dreams, and building something beautiful together." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Will you marry me?" The moment felt surreal and completely natural at the same time. Here was a man who knew her history, understood her vulnerabilities, and loved her not despite them but because of who she'd become through surviving and growing from her experiences. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Absolutely yes." As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, the restaurant erupted in applause. But Naomi barely heard it. She was focused on the feeling of rightness, of choosing to share her complete life with someone who valued it exactly as it was. The ring was beautiful, not ostentatious or calculated to impress, but thoughtfully chosen to reflect her taste and personality. Unlike Derek's ring, which she now realized had been selected for maximum emotional impact regardless of her actual preferences, this ring felt like Marcus had been paying attention to who she really was. Later that evening, as they sat in Naomi's apartment sharing the news with her family via video calls, she watched Marcus interact with her mother and Grace with the same genuine affection he'd shown from the beginning. There was no performance, no calculated charm designed to gain access to her life, just authentic care for the people who mattered to her. "I'm so happy for you both," Beverly said through the phone screen, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Marcus, welcome to our family officially." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I promise to love your daughter as well as she deserves to be loved." "I know you will, son. I can see it in how you look at her." Grace, calling from the hospital during her break, was characteristically direct. "Marcus Washington, you better take good care of my sister, or you'll have me to deal with." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied with a grin. "Though I think your sister is pretty capable of taking care of herself." "She is," Grace agreed. "But it's nice that she won't have to." After they'd finished the family calls, Naomi and Marcus sat together on her couch, her head on his shoulder, both of them still processing the magnitude of what they'd committed to. "Can I tell you something?" Naomi said. "Always. When Derek proposed to me, I cried because I was so grateful that someone wanted to marry me. Tonight, I cried because I was so happy to choose someone I want to marry. Do you understand the difference?" Marcus tightened his arms around her. Desperation versus choice. Gratitude versus joy. Settling versus choosing. Exactly. And that difference is everything. They talked late into the night about their future, where they wanted to live, how they wanted to combine their careers, what kind of life they wanted to build together. Unlike her conversations with Derek, which had always felt vaguely one-sided, this felt like genuine collaboration between equals. "What do you think our wedding should be like?" Marcus asked. Naomi smiled, thinking of all the elaborate plans she'd made for her wedding to Derek. Plans that had been more about proving she could have a fairy tale romance than about actually celebrating a meaningful relationship. "Small," she said. "Just family and close friends. I want it to be about us and the commitment we're making, not about impressing anyone or proving anything." "That sounds perfect. Your mother's garden?" "With Pastor Williams officiating, just like I always dreamed. But this time for the right reasons with the right person." 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Naomi Thompson became Naomi Washington in the same garden where Derek had once proposed to her with false promises. But this ceremony was everything that one would have been fake. Genuine, joyful, and surrounded by people who truly loved and supported them both. Beverly had transformed the garden into something magical with simple white flowers and twinkling lights. Grace served as maid of honor, radiant in her navy dress and fierce in her protective love for her sister. Simone read a poem about finding love after heartbreak that left half the guests in tears. Tanya, now a permanent fixture in their Atlanta circle and a bridesmaid who'd become like a sister, had helped Naomi get ready that morning with hands that were steady and sure. "You look beautiful," she'd said, fastening the simple pearl necklace that had been their grandmother's. "But more than that, you look like yourself. Completely, authentically, joyfully yourself." Pastor Williams conducted the ceremony with the same warmth and wisdom he'd brought to their family for decades. When he asked Naomi and Marcus to share their vows, their words came from hearts that were full of certainty rather than desperate hope. "Marcus," Naomi said, looking into the eyes of the man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her completely, "I promise to love you not because I need you to complete me, but because choosing to share my complete life with you makes me happier than I ever thought possible." "Naomi," Marcus replied, "I promise to love the brilliant, strong, amazing woman you are today while supporting you in becoming whoever you want to be tomorrow. I promise to be your partner in building something beautiful together." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was witnessed by a small group of people who genuinely celebrated their happiness, not because they were relieved Naomi had finally found someone, but because they could see that she'd found someone worthy of the incredible woman she'd always been. At the small reception in Beverly's backyard, as Naomi danced with her new husband while their friends and family looked on with joy, she caught sight of the spot in the garden where Derek had proposed years earlier. Instead of pain or regret, she felt profound gratitude. Gratitude that she'd discovered his deception before making the biggest mistake of her life. Gratitude for the journey that had led her to understand her own worth. Gratitude for the people who'd supported her through the darkness and celebrated with her in the light. Most of all, gratitude for the clarity to recognize real love when she found it. Love that didn't make her feel grateful or desperate or incomplete, but love that made her feel like the best version of herself every single day. As the evening wound down and she and Marcus prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Naomi took one last look around her mother's garden. Tomorrow they would fly to Greece for 2 weeks of exploration and relaxation. Next month they would move into the house they'd chosen together. A home that would be truly theirs, built on honesty and shared dreams. In the fall, Safeguard Solutions would expand internationally, potentially preventing financial crimes across multiple countries. Tanya's salon business continued to thrive, and she'd started dating a wonderful man she'd met through her support group for fraud victims. The other Richardson survivors had all found their own paths to healing and success. Derek Patterson, David Paul Richardson, was serving his federal sentence and would remain in prison for many years to come. His mother had been released after serving her time but had disappeared from public view, presumably starting over somewhere with a new identity and hopefully a new understanding of right and wrong. "Ready to go, Mrs. Washington?" Marcus asked, offering his arm as they prepared to leave the reception. "Ready for everything," Naomi replied, taking his arm and walking toward their future together. As they drove away from the garden where she'd once been deceived by false promises, Naomi thought about the words Derek had spoken to his mother that terrible night when her world had fallen apart. "She's not smart, Mom." He'd been wrong about that, just as he'd been wrong about everything else. She was smart. Smart enough to recognize deception once she knew what to look for, smart enough to build a business that protected others, smart enough to choose love based on reality rather than desperation, smart enough to know her own worth. But more than smart, she was strong. Strong enough to survive betrayal and emerge wiser. Strong enough to help other women avoid the same fate. Strong enough to open her heart again to someone who deserved her trust. And as she drove toward her honeymoon and her new life with a man who loved her exactly as she was, Naomi Thompson Washington knew with absolute certainty that Derek had been wrong about one final thing. She wasn't going to die alone. She was going to live surrounded by authentic love, meaningful work, and the unshakable knowledge that she was complete, valuable, and worthy of every good thing that came her way. And that, she realized, was the most beautiful truth of all.